Hello and welcome to the Intellect's Cove. My name is Colin Fairley. I'm a pragmatist philosopher and political theorist based at Queen's University in Canada. And in this video, I'm going to release the first of a series of videos that go into chapter 1 of my new book, Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science, that is published with Oxford University Press. And I'm happy to say you can access and download the book for free as an open access book starting in August of 2026. So for chapter 1, I'm going to release 3 shorter videos that give you a bird's eye perspective on some of the broader themes that the book canvasses. And in this first video, the title is Science as a Moral Enterprise. And I'll just note that this is a normative prescriptive statement, not a factual statement. So the actual enterprise of science, as we'll see over the course of the book discussion, falls short of meeting our expectations for it as a moral enterprise. But this book tries to motivate us to aspire to improve the scientific enterprise to actually better facilitate the well-being of human populations living in a warming, unequal, and aging world. So in this first video, I'm going to just survey some of the topics that come up in the early stages of chapter 1. But in the subsequent videos for chapter 1, I will talk about the distinction between knowledge in wisdom inquiry science, which is a key argument throughout the book. And then finally, I will post a video on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and how she frames translational science in her work of fiction, which is very relevant to how translational gerontology may be framed. All right, so let's first start with some comments about what is translational science. Right? Knowledge about the natural world often can be translated into interventions that allow us to improve population health and planetary health. And so it's really at the interface of the transformation of ideas into practical applications that the field of translational science is concerned with. And from the images here, you can see there's a variety of different types of technologies, ranging from those in medical science to communication, to transportation, and to warfare. Not all translational science is morally laudable science. Science can be used in ways that are beneficial to human and planetary health, but it can also be used in ways that is detrimental to the well-being of existing generations, future generations, and non-human species. So when we think about the most morally laudable scientific innovations, these would be ones that have helped us prevent and reduce the prevalence of infectious diseases that historically killed human populations at very high rates. And when we think about the science that is being most ethically problematic, these would concern things that have allowed us to, kill humans on a scale that would have been unimaginable just 100 years ago through technological innovation around warfare. So Austin provides us a good definition of translational science for biomedical research. That is, that the mission of translational science as it pertains to medical science is to bring predictivity and efficiency to the development and dissemination of interventions that improve human health. Right? So the predictability, ideally, there's an empirical basis for specific novel intervention in terms of its ability to prevent or treat a specific disease developing. And that this is an improvement over existing interventions, which may have had some efficacy, but not as effective as this new innovation. And so my research as a philosopher working at the intersection of biomedical science and ethics and politics is on the interconnection between science and ethics. And one of the things that I emphasize in the book is that science and ethics both need each other. They're interdependent, right? Science will go wayward if it's not informed by sound ethical judgments. And conversely, ethical theories developed by bioethicists or political philosophers are likely to be less useful and perhaps impair our ability to make rational decisions about regulating biomedical innovation if they are not at least adequately empirically informed by the actual science. So science and bioethics both need each other, and unfortunately, there's not much conversation between scholars working in these disparate fields, what C.P. Snow called the two cultures. In my area of research in philosophy and bioethics, criticism is usually targeted against scientists for not taking ethics seriously, but I would equally apply that criticism to my own field, that there are many philosophers and bioethicists pontificating about translational science with very little understanding of the actual workings of the scientific enterprise and the specifics and the technological innovation that they are addressing. And so I really want to help bridge the gap between the empirical and the normative. And this book tries to do that with respect to longevity science. So on the criticism for philosophy and bioethics, in a previous video, I joked about casting the armchair of normative theory into the lava pit. And I think that's certainly apt for trying to bridge the gap between science and ethics, that you need to actually know something about the science. Like, why is that scientific innovation important? What are the actual real-world hurdles that impede biomedical innovation? You can't just from the armchair pontificate about the ethics of biomedical innovation without actually knowing something about the issues that arise in practice. And conversely, for scientists, as we'll see throughout the book, I argue that the war against disease is at risk of collapsing into a knowledge inquiry approach to longevity science when it fixates on the sole goal of delaying mortality into later life for populations that are surviving beyond the age of 70, without stepping back and looking at the wider context about what it is that most people actually value, which is the opportunity to have quality of life in later life, not simply delaying mortality into later life by extending the duration of time people can manage the multimorbidities, frailty, and disability of late life. So I cast criticism in equal measure towards my own discipline of philosophy and bioethics, as well as to the scientific enterprise in terms of ensuring that it takes seriously the challenges of population aging and the aspirations of healthy longevity for today's aging populations. So one thing to note about progress in translational science is it's typically slow and uncertain. It's a very laborious task, one that takes patience and rigorous scientific experimentation and the gathering of empirical evidence. And as Curry points out in this passage noted here, the term translational science is often captured by catchphrases like bridging the chasm, walking the bridge, lost in translation. And the term that I use is from the bench to the clinic. And in particular, I'm interested in the challenges that translational gerontology, that is research on the biology of aging, faces in terms of testing for safety, efficacy, and the costs of innovation in translational gerontology. So my book is particularly focused on both existing and potential innovations in translational gerontology. So in chapter 1, I identify the 3 broad traditions that I will rely upon to make the argumentation that I do in Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science. And the first one is Potter's definition of bioethics from 1971. Potter was a biochemist who devoted his career to the study of cancer, and later in his career, he was very influential in formulating what bioethics is as a discipline, that it's a discipline predicated on the insight that ethical values cannot be separated from biological facts, and that we should be concerned with themes like human progress and human survival, the obligation to the future, control of technology, and the need for interdisciplinary effort. So all the aspects of Potter's conception of bioethics will loom large in the ethical analysis I deploy for longevity science. For example, the need for interdisciplinary effort. Now, I spent 20 years of my career trying to learn about the actual science, the latest scientific insights on the biology of aging, and I published extensively in scientific journals dealing with the biology of aging to try to bridge the gap between the ethical discussions about the field of science and to do so in a way that was actually informed by the science. We'll also see that the themes of human progress loom large in my book through the tale of the progress through the ocean of longevity, the obligation of the future when I discuss how translational gerontology can help with promoting planetary health to ensure that healthy aging is a reality for future generations. And so Potter's account of bioethics is the first kind of foundation of the normative analysis I deploy for longevity science. And I really want to emphasize the need for interdisciplinary effort. This book is a book designed to try to speak to philosophers, to scientists, and to the general public that are interested in the future health prospects of human populations. Potter's book, Bioethics: Bridge to the Future, is a great metaphor that we should deploy bioethics to help us diagnose and address the challenges of the future. And I think population aging and the aspiration to promote healthy longevity is, among the top, if not the top, moral imperative for humanity in the 21st century. And this quotation here from Furnari captures Potter's concern that he warned about the need to withdraw from the frantic pace of advances in knowledge. As knowledge goes deeper, it loses its ability to see itself as part of a wider context, right? And so the need to look around, itself to understand the relationships between a particular type of cancer and problems of the ecosystem becomes the symptom of a more general need, and the need to understand where our knowledge comes from and where it is leading. So this, again, very aptly captures the central concern of my book, which is to help us look around to see both the successes and the challenges that we face in an aging world in terms of trying to improve the quality of life for populations that are surviving beyond the 7th decade of life. And that population aging is occurring in a warming world, and that it's occurring with some persistent health disparities. So just to emphasize some of the key things that I will emphasize in later chapters in the book, when we look around at the world in the beginning of the 21st century, what we see is that populations are aging. Life expectancy now has surpassed age 73, and people are having less children. So the future will be a future with older populations, and this is a novel development. There's no time historically where this transformation of population aging on the scale that is occurring today has taken place. But more importantly, there's a growing disparity between health span, that is how long people live in reasonably good health, free of the diseases, frailty, and disability of advanced age, and how long they survive managing the multimorbidities of late life. And when we look around the world, we see the persistence of health disparities caused by exposure to stressors that have accelerated biological aging, in particular in vulnerable groups, for example, those vulnerable to socioeconomic disadvantage. So Potter's conception of bioethics is a really nice way of framing why the science of healthy longevity should be at the center stage of bioethical discussions and debates in the 21st century. But unfortunately, at the moment, it's on the margins, and I hope my book will help shine a bright spotlight on the importance of tackling. And also climate change. Population aging is occurring simultaneously with climate change, and there's some specific ethical issues that this amplifies. And the last two chapters of the book are devoted to the interdependence between human health and planetary health. All right, so my last comment about Potter is just to take this snapshot of a quotation from him, that mankind is urgently in need of new wisdom that will provide the knowledge of how to use knowledge for man's survival and for the improvement in the quality of life. This concept of wisdom as a guide for action, the knowledge of how to use knowledge for the social good, might be called the science of survival, and it's surely the prerequisite to improvements in the quality of life. And I think this is absolutely essential for talking about the issues that face aging populations in the world today. What's very relevant to improving quality of life is redressing the nearly 10-year gap between health span and lifespan. And this is where the ideal of rate control, that is rate of aging control, to slow down the rate of molecular and cellular decline, is now more important than trying to conquer each single disease one at a time, because some success in disease control may be actually exacerbating the gap between health span and lifespan. So the essential premise of my book is that wisdom involves prioritizing the aspirations of rate control. Not that we abandon the ideal of disease control, but we recognize that it has limitations as populations are surviving beyond the 7th decade of life. This brings me then to the second philosophical tradition that I rely upon for the main argumentation throughout the book. And this is two of my favorite philosophers of science, Nicholas Maxwell and Philip Kitcher. Maxwell captures this idea of wisdom inquiry science, which echoes very much what Potter was arguing with respect to bioethics, but Maxwell's concern is more broadly with the scientific enterprise, and Philip Kitcher's concept of responsible biology. So for the purpose of keeping this video relatively short, I'm not going to elaborate on Maxwell and Kitcher here, but you can expect a series of videos released in the future, which will do a deep dive into both of these things, especially the next video, which will be on Maxwell's discussion of the distinction between wisdom and knowledge inquiry science. Third philosophical source that I rely on for the book is the pragmatism of John Dewey and William James, which really emphasize that the primary goal of the philosopher should be educational, that is, framing issues in ways that help facilitate more rational understanding and deliberation and debate. One of the books that was really critical in helping me conceptualize who I was writing my book for was Philip Kitcher's What's the Use of Philosophy? And in that book, he really describes that philosophy primarily should be conceived of as a general theory of education. That the primary goal of the philosopher should be to explain the meaning of new knowledge. And this really is what my book is devoted to doing. What is the meaning of translational gerontology for humanity? Should we see the science around the biology of aging as something that will create greater opportunities for health, for wealth, and for equality? Or should we see it as something that's going to create a society of haves and have-nots and bring ecological disaster and overpopulation? So what does this knowledge point to in terms of action and consequences? This really is what the focus of my book is. My book is on what we can do to try to steer the project of translational gerontology in a direction that will create more desirable outcomes and minimize any potential risks of harm that may come from this translational science. All right, so a quotation from Dewey that really captures the spirit of what I'm trying to do. If we are willing to conceive education as the process of forming fundamental dispositions, intellectual and emotional, toward nature and fellow men, philosophy may even be defined as the general theory of education. So what should our dispositions be towards translational science on aging? That's really what I'm concerned with in the book. The book is actually a book about the role of imagination in our thoughts about translational gerontology. I try to prime a number of distinct intellectual and emotional dispositions towards the new science of healthy aging. So when it comes to longevity science, what should our attitudes be both to disease control, which has had great success in allowing populations to survive past age 70, but is now contributing to a growing disparity between health span and lifespan, and the novel aspirations of what Alex Comfort called rate control, which is to target biological aging itself to increase health span and hopefully compress morbidity in late life. What should our intellectual and emotional dispositions be to both disease control and rate control? That is what the book will explore. And finally, this quotation from William James from 1879, what is the task which philosophers set themselves to perform, and why do they philosophize at all? Right? So why write a book about longevity science? Almost everyone will immediately reply. Right? Bear in mind, this is in 1879, because I would tell you now in 2026, this wouldn't be what most philosophers would reply. They desire to attain a conception of the frame of things which shall on the whole be more rational than the somewhat chaotic view which everyone by nature carries about with him under his hat. So, I've been studying how bioethicists and philosophers discuss and debate the science of translational gerontology, and there are many chaotic views that we carry under our hat. There's an obsession with discussing immortality and radical life extension as if science was on the cusp of making us immortal. And there's also a lot of ageism, that people have the view that those who have survived longer somehow have no legitimate claim to improving their health. So we have problems like fictional depictions of the science, and we also have ageism. And these are the chaotic views that I seek to abate in the book and try to instead utilize a framing that gets us to connect the dots in a more rational fashion with respect to why trying to promote the health of older populations is something that is a win-win for human and environmental health. So this brings to conclusion the first video for Chapter 1, Science as a Moral Enterprise. In the next video, I will be going through knowledge versus wisdom, which I briefly referred to earlier with Maxwell. And then the third video installment for Chapter 1 is on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.